Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Art of Performance podcast. Today, we're diving deep into the hot and the cold truth, unpacking the benefits and the bullshit of ice baths and heat therapy. And today is going to be a fantastic episode. Akos, my brother, how the devil are we?
I'm fucking amazing, mate. I am seriously cold today, so I think this is perfect timing to talk about heat and cold therapy, especially when my boiler's been packed up and I've just got it sorted. Thank God for that. But flipping hell, do we need that? I need some heat in my life. I need some heat.
Akos is already practicing heat therapy at home with his heating on 65 degrees, ladies and gentlemen. So let's dive straight into this topic, because let's be honest, mate, we've been around a little bit too long now. We're a bit long in the tooth, and this trend came about very, very recently, probably in the last sort of maybe about 5-10 years, and I feel like it's gained recent explosion in the health and wellness space and popularity. I think personally from some of the sports like CrossFit, High Rocks more specifically, and influencers just sitting in their garden in their fucking budgie smugglers in the middle of winter going, you've got to jump in your ice bath and it's going to be great. But it has gained more and more and more and more popularity because so many people are swearing by it in an influential position that it is a major wellness trend that Gen Pop people are jumping on the back of without even considering some of the bigger rocks. And in today's episode, ladies and gentlemen, we are hoping that we can cut through some of the hype. We can give you a science-backed, honest answer and a no bullshit breakdown of if these therapies are actually worth their weight in gold. Because if they're not, we want you to understand why they're not and where they can be useful. So I'll preface this by saying there are both sides of the coin, and we're hitting this with an unbiased approach. So we're going to explore both cold and we're going to explore both hot. Bakos, let's start with, where the fuck is this trend just exploded from? What's going on?
It's the fitness fuckfluencers, isn't it? It's them again, isn't it? It's always the fitness fuckfluencers. It's just, I mean, the athletes are doing it, aren't they? So when, it was just like, it's like the effect of, we got to cover this one day, but it's the effect of Michael Phelps doing cupping therapy before the Olympics and having those suction pad marks all over his back. And then the surge of everyone doing cupping without knowing the benefits, without having a clue of if there is an actual science behind it, which actually kills me. And I think the cold water immersion and the cold plunge is where we're at with that one, aren't we? Like we've seen enough athletes, enough influencers doing it, saying there's loads of benefits. And it's one of those trends, mate. It's one of those trends, isn't it? That just comes out of nowhere. And like, yeah, what do you think? Like, what's your thoughts on it? If you see someone on Instagram now jumping in a cold bath right now, what's your instant thought? Tell me your instant thought. No holds barred.
Oh, for fuck's sake. What's going on here? That's what I'm thinking. What is going on here? So I think when I see it, I'm a massive, massive advocate of, if you enjoy doing something and it brings you fucking pleasure, wonderful, fantastic, great, keep doing it. Keep doing it. If it's not hurting you, if it makes the passage of time and your life happier, go after it, have it. But I think what I dislike about some of the cold water immersion and equally some of the hot therapy is that people hang their whole existence, their identity, and their physiological change on that methodology of recovery. Or that method of recovery, when in actuality, that ain't fucking it. It's all of the big rocks that you've looked after as well. Because we know people that participate in cold water immersion and or heat therapy, they're normally practicing other health-related activities, right? So I'm kind of on the fence of, that's all well and good, but don't be a fitness fuckfluencer.
Oh.
I can't even get my words out. Or a fitness shithouse shitfluencer where we are now trying to sell a certain ice bath pod that you're now getting a 15% cut off because it costs £1,000 to buy it and you're making some financial reward from it. That, for me, is the bit that I hate about it, because that's then the snake oil salesman tactic.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
That's my
absolutely.
viewpoint.
Yeah, I think it's also a bit of a for fitness influencers and for possibly athletes that are trying to grow their following. It's something to put out there, isn't it? And it, and if you're in half decent nick, getting in your tighty whities and jumping in an ice bath looks pretty cool online and blah blah blah. And it's just a really interesting subject, because do you ever do it? Have you ever done it? Like, do you do cold water immersion yourself?
I have practiced and done some cold water immersion. I went through a phase and a stage where I was doing it quite regularly, acutely, after I had trained hard. And the focus for me wasn't on building muscle, which will come after that. It was more about doing multi efforts of training in the same day to try and recover as quick as I can. But I felt good doing it. But it's the other added things that we have to consider, which I really, 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 really want to explore. But what about yourself? You been in it?
No, I cannot do ice. Get me away from ice. I'm a Greek guy. I'm supposed to be in a hot, sunny country. Do not put me anywhere that's cold. I don't do it. I'm a bear. I want to hibernate in the cold. Just wake me up when it's warm again. And so I've got a lot of biases. This is gonna. We try and not to bring our biases, and we look at the evidence, don't we? But at the same time, I think everyone wants to hear our opinion as well. And for me, cold water immersion is my literal worst nightmare. Mate, you could put that in a picture.
Some people it is. For some people it is, mate. I've got my wife will not jump in the ice bath. Fact, but she will sit in a sauna for 5 minutes or so. So, and there are things that people like and people don't like. When I was doing it, I did, and again, we'll talk about some of the chemical releases that happen when we do these type of things. I felt pretty good doing it, but it's when I stopped doing it because some of the big rocks weren't in place for me. And I was like, well, this isn't really benefiting me anyway. And it's having that awareness. So I think it's important to start with a little bit of the science behind CWI, cold water immersion therapy. So in a nutshell, cold water immersion works on the body by constricting, and we call it vasoconstriction. Constriction of the blood vessels. It was supposed to reduce inflammation. It's supposed to delay the onset of muscle soreness. It's supposed to have some form of dopamine release that improves your mood. These are all of the things that were supposedly cited. And it's not to say that they are not actually things that are happening, because in some respect they are, aren't they? We've got to understand that from a physiological mechanism and a physiological standpoint, cold water or cold's effect on the nervous system can stimulate that vagus nerve. And this can be linked to mood. It can be linked to a bit of stress. It could be linked to feeling a bit better, pushing yourself a little bit, and then having that big, I've done it, like hurrah moment, right? So physiologically, there might be some benefits, but when we look at some of the data, that might not be the case, right, Akos? And that's some of the stuff that you've brought out.
Yeah, I've gone through the research, and I've done this probably 3 or 4 times with cold water immersion, because obviously we're still affected by trends, right? If we see loads of people doing it, we're still, even though we're evidence based and we know our stuff, we're still going to be slightly influenced. And I've had even though it would be my worst nightmare, I've had an ice bath in a car a couple of times over. Luckily, I've never pressed buy now. And it's perfect that it's just, I go to the research and you look at the research, and I'm not going to put the nail in the coffin on it yet, because it's still early days. There's only sort of research from about 2009 onwards. So it's still relatively new. We have got some meta-analyses on it. But like you say, it's hypothetical at best at this stage. There's no real significant differences in reducing muscle. There's a little bit of reducing muscle soreness, but it's perspective,
It's
I think,
placebo,
more than
isn't it? It's placebo for the athlete. And that's what we're seeing documented. We're seeing that the research from cold exposure affects cortisol, affects dopamine, affects mental alertness, affects cognitive stuff. But it's all from a subjective standpoint when the athletes or when individuals have been exposed to a question set and they've gone, how do you feel? What are the perceived efforts? And more so there than it is down from a cellular level where people have said, all right, it's actually helping me recover. Well, actually, from a performance standpoint, we're seeing differently because you're still putting the same output down. So let's explore some of the myths and the facts, because one of the facts that we have obviously seen, and this is a bit more well documented now than ever, right, is there is a growing amount of evidence surrounding muscle hypertrophy. So for those of you who don't know what hypertrophy is, it is simply muscle growth. So if you are somebody who is focused on muscle hypertrophy and your goal is to build muscle and stimulate that process, that physiological adaptation, particularly if you're on a compositional change or a gain or whatever that thing might be, what have we seen from some of the evidence when we talk about what's happening there?
We have seen a blunting of the process of muscle protein synthesis after training, because obviously you stimulate muscle. The process of training isn't where you get the results, it's the recovery process. And what happens is you break down, there's inflammatory responses. One of the inflammatory responses is an increase of muscle protein synthesis acutely after training. Now, that's a very important part of building muscle. And actually, the meta-analyses in 2023, it's muscular strength. It's strength as well. So strength and muscle.
Yeah.
It inhibits that strength development because it blocks muscle protein synthesis. At the point where you need inflammation, I think the first thing people need to understand, the nugget, is inflammation isn't always bad. We always talk about inflammation being bad. Oh, we've got inflammation. It's inflammatory. Like when you get an injury, the inflammatory process of getting liquid around that joint or around that injury is one of the most important things that we can do. And it has to happen. If we blunt that response, we're reducing the recovery. We're elongating the recovery time. We're extending the recovery. So when we train, we break down. There is an inflammatory response. Muscle protein synthesis comes up. We want that acutely. We don't want it to last forever, but we want that acutely. Now, cold water immersion straight after training or in that window seems to blunt it. So if you've got goals of strength and muscular hypertrophy, cold water immersion after training is a no-no for me. That's what I would say to my athletes. That's what I would say to anyone listening. There must be better times from doing it. That's not the time to do it. And it's unfortunately when most people do it. You know, and I watched an athlete, actually an endurance athlete who's really, really good endurance athlete. Can't remember her name. But she done a video. She jumped in. She's got one, like a proper chamber in her house. Unreal. She jumps in there and she spends 5 minutes in there. And then she said, oh, you know, I do this every time after my training. Not really sure why, but, you know, sort of makes me feel better, blah, blah, blah. You're like, wow, why would you buy something that's probably about 10 grand? And why would you do something every day not knowing why you're doing it?
I think this is really important, actually, because when we talk about athletes, I love this analogy of the big rocks. The big rocks in recovery are you sleeping like a fucking adult, first and foremost? And when I say like an adult, do you have a routine whereby you have your phone put away 30 to 60 minutes before bed? You're in bed. When you hit the pillow, you go to sleep. You're in a cold, dark room. You're able to put earplugs in or whatever that is to silence out any external noise. And your sleep cycle, and you go through the 4 or 5 stages of sleep, you have quality sleep, and it's in and around 7 to 8 hours. If you're hitting that marker, great, we've got sleep ticked off. The other recovery method, are you consuming enough nutrients and macros, particularly based on the goal that you're striving for? If it is strength or muscle trying to build muscle hypertrophy specifically, are we consuming the right amount of grams per pound per kilogram of body weight based on what we need? And also, are we hitting the calories that we should be consuming? There's another one from a nutritional perspective. And then the other third one is probably more around the holistic lifestyle stuff. So are we managing stress? Are we able to take time out? Like, these things are all really important. Now, these big pillars, all of those, these big rocks need to be in place before we ever even think about considering some of the bigger trends. Otherwise, it just becomes another expensive bloody hobby. Much like when supplements became the craze and everybody started to buy things like CBD oils and then realized, oh my God, actually, I'm just buying expensive weed. Or we're taking all these other crazy athletics greens powders. And when you look at the back of it and you realize, actually, maybe I'm not getting the nutrients that I thought I was going to get. And these are the things that we're talking about. Like, if you haven't got these big pillars in place, this is where things like this are not going to support or help you, no matter how much you try and do. So I go back to a big point. This athlete that you're talking about, we're talking about muscle protein synthesis. We're talking about strength. We've got some evidence that it's blunting it. We've got some literature that's showing that it's probably not beneficial in that perspective. What about mental toughness and resilience? This fucking cliche clickbaity title that's throwing around at the moment. What are we seeing from cold water exposure there?
I don't know any of the psychological changes. You might have some stuff on that. I do focus on physiological, because a lot of that resilience, how do you measure that? I don't really know how you measure like more resilience and we obviously there's dopamine responses. So the dopamine response, mood, you feel better. I mean, everyone that comes out of once you get in it, that is, if you can get in it, then most people will come out saying, I feel pretty good after that. I've never heard anyone say, oh, that was shit, I feel crap, like I want to, So there must be some psychological benefit. The resilience thing is like, if you feel like you need to start the day with a cold plunge, because that's the hardest thing you're going to do in a day, and then everything else is easier, go for it. If it works for you, absolutely go for it. This is what we're saying. If you found a process and a strategy that works for you, amazing. But if your recovery is pinned on it, you need to rethink the strategy. Simple as that.
Yeah. I feel like there's two, not pockets, but there's two groups here. We've got one group that are using it from a recovery performance standpoint to try and get the most out of the recovery side. And in effect, we've kind of got the evidence to say that there's a bit of a blunting process happening with that, if strength and muscle is the focus. We've then got this other group, which is all about activating the sympathetic nervous system and starting something hard every day to improve your resilience. Now, of course, if you are doing the one hardest task, which is jumping in a cold bath, this is layering and I like to think about this, think of this like an onion layer. If you're at the center of that onion, this is just adding another thin layer of skin and a thin layer of toughness, which 95% of the time, people that are participating in these things early start in the morning, these are the type of people that are probably more akin to focusing in on nutrition, focusing in on sleep, focusing in on stress management, focusing in on all these other areas. They are participating in health-related behaviors. So Karen or Ken from Instagram or Facebook buying an ice bath and sticking it in their garden and jumping into it in their budgie smugglers isn't really the best place to start when we talk about building resilience and building toughness. Actually, we should probably go below and hit the causality first. Like, what's causing you to feel shit? What's causing you to be tired, stressed? Have you got those factors catered for first? More so before we start talking about whether the science of cold water immersion is something that you should or should not be doing, whether or not it dampens gains in muscle hypertrophy and strength, or whether it reduces soreness and makes you feel really fucking good and it increases your dopamine and makes you feel great. That doesn't matter. It matters about the big rocks. And this is something that we wanted to bring up initially when we spoke about the science of cold water immersion therapy, because I think it's a really, really, really important topic. So let's go down the contrast route here. Let's talk about heat therapy. So
now we're in my world,
probably, baby. But interestingly, I'll be honest with you, for the past 2 years, 18 months now, 2 years, I have been going to a sauna at least 3 to 4 times per week. And anecdotally, heat therapy for me has, it's personally, I feel so much more on top of things cognitively. I feel like I'm able to relax a little bit better in the evening. I feel like my sleep's quality's kind of changed a little bit. And although that's anecdotal, we've actually seen some positive stuff, both with cold water immersion, which we've spoken about there, and some positive and negative stuff with heat therapy as well. Which, for a Greek man, I think the guy wants a sauna in his bathroom. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe outside in the garden.
You know me, mate. I've got a sauna in my house. I do some sweaty sauna sessions where I rant and talk about it in my sauna as well. So it's like, it is part of my ritual. The research is pretty good on it, and everything that you would hope cold water immersion would do, I think heat therapy does. Now, you can talk about hot water immersion, so you can talk about hot baths, but saunas specifically, far infrared saunas or a normal sauna, has so many benefits. So we're doing the opposite. We're getting vasodilation. We're getting opening of the blood vessels. We're getting more nutrients, more flow into the body instead of constricting. And it just, so improve recovery over cold water immersion. You know, this is literally through the science and comparing. But then we've also got a lot of added benefits that cold water immersion we don't talk about. It's not just about recovery. We're talking about decreasing in blood pressure, increased nitric oxide production, study in 2001, enhanced endothelial function, heart circulation, heart health. We've got insulin sensitivity. We've got enhanced positive mood status, study in 2023, blood flow with relaxation benefits. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, and even down to like the cellular level as well, particularly from what you've done. And again, we talk about the big rocks: sleep, nutrition, training, stress management. Well, then on top of that, if there is time in your diary or time in your day and you're able to do some heat therapy, whether it's sauna or whatever, and again, you can even get like the heat therapy compression sleeves now, which are great.
Yes.
So actually, there's a little bit of science around how some heat can shock proteins into aiding cellular repair and doing some of the almost like a cellular protein synthesizing activity deeper inside of the cells of the muscle. So there are lots of positives that can be stemmed into hot water or heat therapy. But what's really interesting is when we look at some of the studies, when we talk about longevity and some of the countries that are participating in this, these people that participate in this alongside other health-related activities and behaviors normally lead a far healthier existence as they go into those later years. People like, and we've all seen it, right? Norway, Lithuania, Switzerland, people,
Sweden,
even in Sweden, Germany, all of these countries promote baths, promote saunas, promote heat therapy as a way to relax, but it's almost like an ingrained behavior from an early age that you go in and jump in a sauna. Like it's normal. And there's a lot to be learned from that, I think.
Absolutely. I think you can't say that that's why they live longer. Like there's so many, it's multifactorial, isn't it? It's like 100%. There's so many things, but you can look at trends, right? And and then we can look at the research and we can say, right, the research with the trends, this is why, I think myself and you, Dean, like we're pushing towards the longevity side, aren't we? Like more and more, it's great to perform better in a short block of training or recover better, but we're talking about what can really impact longevity, what can really impact health overall phase of your life, that we're like, okay, this is actually going to help me live longer, feel better when I'm older, all of that stuff. And so weight loss, insulin sensitivity, just so many benefits. I mean, the blood pressure one I done on myself. I had a high blood pressure. I was heavier, so I was a big guy, so blood pressure is going to be high. But it was getting to the level where I was like, okay, I need to let's see what I can do. So I documented my blood pressure. I started the infrared saunas.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Honestly, just instant results. And obviously, it reduces stress. So it's like, it's not just from the sauna. It's like, I'm feeling better. I'm feeling more relaxed. So then my blood pressure's going down.
Yeah.
But it works. It really does work for stuff like that. It's been proven as well. It's really cool stuff.
The science is really positive with it. And if it was me and you're listening to this and we talk about this cold versus hot thing, which should we use and what should we try and jump into? What I think is really interesting for people to understand is you can use both, but let's understand something. If you're doing things like heat therapy, particularly with what you've just gone through there, the hormone and cognitive impact, the cardiovascular health, and the changes that we're seeing with all-cause mortality conditions and problems later on associated with health. We're talking about muscle recovery. We're talking about just promoting a bit of almost like a bit of a release when we talk about reducing cortisol, when we're trying to improve how we've even seen it help with sleep quality as well because of
sleep quality,
how it impacts that stuff. So when we talk about heat therapy, its effect on general overall health and wellness has been well documented that we're seeing. We are starting to see also when we talk about cold water therapy, we're starting to see there are some benefits to it when we talk about things like acute recovery. Maybe you've just done a crazy ass high rocks or you're involved in multiple CrossFit events. There might be some placebo with that. And there also might be some reduced soreness and inflammation in multi-day events that could help you feel better about your performance overall, which therefore then has a placebo into how you are showing up and performing. So I think what a lot of people need to understand is it's not that there is a this or that scenario, right? It's just that what we're seeing with saunas far outweighs some of the recovery benefits and protocols that cold water immersion was believed to have had when we're talking about recovery.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
When we talk about resilience, it could be that cold water might be, if you want to, again, we're talking about sympathetic nervous system, etc., wanting to build more of a tolerance to this type of hard shit, go hard, go home vibe mentality. Great. Maybe cold water immersion is the thing for you that you do in the morning away from your training window as much as you possibly can. So there are benefits to using both. But we've also seen, right, a lot of people have been doing a bit of contrasting stuff. So going from like sauna to a lot of CrossFit athletes have been doing this in the space where they've got an ice bath in the garden and they've got a sauna in the garden and they're going, boom, let's stimulate circulation and relaxation. Now let's jump into vasoconstriction. Let's jump into shock in the system. Let's jump into shock in the sympathetic nervous system. Go bang, here you go, back it, and then getting back into hot again. And it's supposed to be around reducing soreness and promoting recovery, but again, the evidence is really limited here. Really fucking limited.
Until you get more evidence, you can't really say whether there is a benefit. And the trend of people getting in ice baths has mainly moved. The ones that I follow has moved to hot sauna into cold water immersion. So they realised, okay, there's some restriction, and they talk about the vasoconstriction into the vasodilation, basically training the blood vessels and the blood flow. And that's what they say. But there's just not enough evidence to say.
Not enough.
No, not enough. But most people are saying, oh yeah, that feels great. It's not really easy for most people though. Again, practical application, like where do we do this? Like it's not the same as if you've got a gym that you've got a cold plunge and a hot sauna, you might get away with it. But it's not just getting under a cold shower. That's not cold enough. That's not the same effects, because I've done the whole,
they say
in David Lloyd, getting in the hot shower.
But also going back to that point, if you're trying to build some mental toughness, you don't need to invest in a massive cold plunge. What you might do is flick the shower on and go from warm initially, or do 20 seconds in cold and build your resilience that way. Build your tolerance that way. Turn it on for 30 seconds the week after, 45, then 60, then 2 minutes. There is ways and means in which you can build tolerance to help improve some of that dopamine kick that you're looking for with waking up in the morning and feeling ready and refreshed. Like, these are all great things. Like, cold therapy, it's an expensive thing. Heat therapy and getting saunas is an expensive thing. If you go to a gym and they're available, like, have at trying both of them. But just understand that if your goal is hypertrophy and changing composition and improving what's happening there, the impact that cold therapy has is that it blunts the inflammatory response that we want to see, and it stops that signaling pathway for hypertrophy to take effect. If you're in heat therapy, we've noticed that it doesn't interfere with hypertrophy. If anything, it could aid in muscle recovery because of the circulation effects. So if you're a hypertrophy style dudette, put your cold water bath stuff right early on in the day, get it started early on, and then don't have it near your training window where you can help it. Try and promote more heat, right? Try and promote more heat. But
absolutely. I'd even add, sorry, quickly, mate. I would even add that there was a study in 2007. Now, that the Nurasaki in 2023 said reduced, for cold water immersion, said reduced delayed onset muscle soreness and inflammation. Obviously, we know that inflammation process is quite important. Helps athletes recover after intense workouts. Okay. But 2007 study, Crow, impaired anaerobic performance and potentially leading to reduced peak power output in high intensity activities. So I would say even the high rocks guys, even the CrossFitters, it's just for me, my opinion as a coach, I can have my opinion. I would say it's a no anywhere near the training window. If you want to use it in the morning, great. But regardless of whether you want to build muscle, get stronger, or you want to be a really good performer in high intensity activities, maybe endurance athletes, maybe that you get away with it for an endurance athlete. Again, because maybe just the DOMs may be higher if you're doing like an Ironman or a triathlon. The delayed onset muscle soreness after a big event is going to be a lot higher than, a high rocks or something like that. So maybe, okay, if that's, you're going to reduce your response to that competition from 5 days post you can't train to 3 days post, and you get, you're getting back into your training a bit earlier, then that acute response of blunting muscle protein synthesis and all of that stuff, you can probably outweigh and say, for an endurance athlete, maybe we could do this. But I would say cold water, nowhere near training. If you want to do it in the morning, and good luck to you. I'm not joining,
mate. It's interesting you say it, mate, because like from our side, we encourage our athletes, if they're on a conjugate cycle or a concurrent training block, the demands of the training where strength, power, speed, and some of these derivatives and components that we need you to display in training to get the physiological adaptation, if anything, cold water immersion is not going to provide you the desired effect. However, if you've got an ice bath and it makes you wake up in the morning and you feel good doing it, to be honest, if you're doing this recreationally because you're enjoying it, whatever, and you're an athlete that just likes to do it because you enjoy it, you're not being paid to do your sport, do it in the morning. That's not a problem. So I go on the other side of the coin. If you enjoy it, fucking do it. Not a problem at all.
Yep.
But if you are going into the gym and you are, like you've already alluded to, if you're trying to express force, express strength, express power, you're trying to improve things like muscle protein synthesis, improve composition, improve your ability to build muscle hypertrophy, I would maybe keep it as far away from the training windows as you can, or even just keep it to your rest days. But I would always recommend, if our athletes can, if you can get and sit in a hot bath, brilliant.
Yeah.
If you can put a hot bath on, And especially in the evening before bed, because we've seen, and this is another episode, we can talk about some of the cognitive physiological effects that are happening once you've had a hot bath in the evening, the effects that has on sleep quality. There are big things that come with that, because that's a big rock that we can change. We have a choice and we can change that. That's an effective change that we can put inside of our program. Have a hot bath an hour or so before bed and see if that changes how you feel. Like, so many people have got these oils that you can put in the bath, and these aromatherapies, apothecary things that help people relax and help people sleep, and they could be really useful for you. But that's going to have a direct impact on how well we sleep. If you want to wake up in the morning and do an ice bath, be my guest, but I'm probably not going to be the dude jumping in a biffa bin in my garden in my pants. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen at all. But let's talk about what we're seeing with some of the literature, because we've seen some practical guidelines that have been floated about. I'll start with the ice bath, cold water immersion stuff. So some studies have shown as little as 2 to 5 minutes per week in temperatures ranging from 7 to 15 degrees Celsius. For you Americans out there, that's about 45 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Give or around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 to 5 minutes has shown to have a little bit of benefit to people that are trying to improve things like dopamine, stress resilience, mental toughness, cognitive function, etc. Document a little bit of that. Upwards towards maybe 10 to 15 minutes if you were going to do that on a weekly basis. What are we seeing with heat therapy? Akos, some of the lower numbers.
The hot water immersion is around 41 degrees, 41 degrees Celsius, or a warm bath control around 36 degrees Celsius. Yeah. So any of those is gonna be effective. I think saunas, like proper saunas, I think they're the 80 degrees Celsius, are more effective and have more benefit than the far infrared stuff, which is a little bit lower. It's like 60, 65 degrees you get out of a far infrared sauna. So like proper Swedish style, bake your tits off style sauna is the one that has the most benefits.
As little as 2 to 3 times a week as well, isn't it? Really, it's not.
I think it has to be repeated bouts. So, like you say, there's no point doing it once a week. There's not a lot of benefit. There is acute benefit, but not long-term benefit. It is repeated bouts, so 2 to 3 times per week, up to, like 5 times a week, 6 times a week, all beneficial. The more you do it, the better. The one caveat I'd say on that is to have it not too close to bed, because you want your core temperature to be like relatively cool to get induced deep sleep. Mm-hmm. And this is not research based. This is more anecdotal from my findings and what I've read. But I would say leave it away from your bedtime. So maybe straight after training, so you've got time for your core temperature to recover back to normal temperatures, and then slightly cooler temperatures for when you go to sleep will induce that deep sleep response straight into deep sleep cycle. So
I think the thing with that one as well, the only one I was going to say is the differences between having a hot bath, which might go up to 35, 40 degrees, and the differences between sitting in a sauna and immersing yourself in a sauna for 15, 20 minutes. Like for me personally, and when you have a warm shower, your body temperature raises and then it comes back down again. But with a sauna, it's very heightened, it's very elevated. So it's just that awareness with what might happen with doing a sauna at late at night before bed, in comparison to having a little bit of a warm bath with some Epsom salts, or just chilling and relaxing, because it might set your bed cycle or sleep cycle a little bit better. It just depends. And it's explorative. It's explorative. All of this is an exploration. And that's kind of what I found out.
What I found out as well with it was funny. Was if you do it near bed, you obviously dehydrate. You sweat. I sweat a lot. I don't know if you're a sweater. I'm a sweater.
I'm a sweater.
And then you try and replenish the fluids. and then I'm up all night weeing. So then my sleep's fucked from that. So it was quite interesting to see that effect. Obviously, the more you sweat, the more electrolytes you're going to lose. So you've got to think about replacing magnesium, potassium, sodium, all of that. So that could be an effect that you might need to just like counteract. But also it needs to be a decent amount of time. Like you say, 10, 15 minutes doesn't seem to get the job done. It needs to be sort of like 40 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes, up to sort of like an hour that gets the best result. And that's a long time sweating, and that's a lot of fluid loss. So I've found that if I can get training done a little bit earlier, get in the sauna a bit earlier, everything seems to be better. And then I replace electrolyte loss with, an electrolyte powder in my water, and I sip, not down. And it seems to work really, really well.
Nice. Love it. Well,
we use hot baths for losing weight as well. Do you know? Have you ever used that for like weight cuts? So you can see how much you dehydrate. I mean, you can cut 2-3 kilos off an athlete. You need to get into a weight category. Get them in a hot bath the night before.
Yeah,
and,
done it with a few boxers.
Yeah, done it a few. Yeah,
done it with a few boxers. A few BJJ athletes that have gone in to compete, and they're like, I need to drop 2-3. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Don't worry about it. You can throw that out, not a problem. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing that we want to take away, ladies and gents, is that we want to encourage you to understand your goals, understand what it is that you're working towards, and whether or not cold water immersion, ice baths, and whether or not heat therapy, saunas, fit into your goals. Because if your focus is building muscle, endurance, etc., it's probably going to bode well for you to keep those ice baths away from the training window and try and do them sparingly. Equally, if you are somebody that the biggest goal in your life is to become a tough cookie and build mental resilience, then maybe do it every morning. Conversely, we go down the other side of the coin. If it's overall general wellness, if it's cognitive performance, if it's cardiometabolic health, even all the way through to sustainability and longevity that we're seeing, that's been documented time and time again, saunas is probably an activity, a health-related activity, well worth having in your approach to how you attack your goals. And this is kind of why we wanted to bring this up, because we're just seeing it as a bit of a trend. We're seeing a lot of people still spend a lot of money on ice baths and not really understand whether or not it's effective for them. And those same bloody people are typically the people that have, and I'm generalizing here, but are typically the people that have probably got all manner of different shit going on in their life, mortgages, car finances, all this other stuff. They've got so much stress going on. The kids are fucking killing them. They've got a broken relationship. They can't manage their stress. They're not eating well all the time, and they're focusing in on this one little small thing at the top of the pyramid and forgetting all of these underpinning factors that need to be kind of taken into account. And these are the big rocks, aren't they, that we really want to focus on. So yeah, what any parting thoughts from your side, brother?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head, mate. Where you covered it earlier, sleep. Like, I think it's so boring, isn't it? Like, sleep. And everyone, I mean, us, when I talk to my athletes and we say, right, sleep needs to be sorted, they're like, eyes roll and like, here we go. But it is literally, forget any of this. If you can improve your sleep, it's 10 times more powerful than any of this hot or cold. So forget hot or cold. If you've got things to do when you can improve on your sleep, none of this matters. Simple as that. So those big rocks always first.
Exactly. Well, team, thank you so much for joining Akos and myself on episode 52 of the Art of Performance podcast, where today you have just listened to the hot and cold truth, unpacking the bullshit and the benefits of heat therapy and cold water immersion therapy. Tune in for episode 53, which I have no doubt will be set to be hopefully another value-packed, action-packed podcast. Once again, as always, thank you from Akos and I for listening to us. If you can, please share it far and wide. Please help us grow the podcast. The more we can grow the podcast, the more we can get incredible guests coming on and having some amazing conversations and their stories. And we have got an absolute banging lineup of different people that we're going to be interviewing and speaking all around performance and health in the coming few months. So please do stay tuned. This is just the beginning. We're loving this journey so far. And from Akos and I, thank you, because we're doing it for everybody else and we're loving doing it at the same time. So Have a great one, team. We'll speak to you next time. Take care.